My dad was a forest ranger, although I can remember, uh, I'm a war baby, and I can remember him working I grew up in Salt Lake, I remember him working not for the Forest Service, but then he went back to the Forest Service when I was 10. And we used to go up in the mountains. We lived in the high Uintas all through the summer, always had our home in Salt Lake, and went to school, but we would live the whole summer up in the mountains. And we had a lot of fun memories, my brothers and sisters and I playing up there in the mountains. My dad built roads for the Wasatch National Forest. So I learned how to carry the water up from the spring, washboard, and up in the mountains where there's no electricity. Well, when we were in the mountains, we told stories and that. One of my favorite things was before we were in the mountains, we played night games with the friends in the neighborhood. We lived on a little dead-end street, and there was 55 children I think it was under high school age. It was a fun neighborhood to grow up in. I'm a Quigley, and the Quigley family always had a lot of gardening and yard work. We never did have a farm, but we worked together as a family. I'm the oldest, so the one I was the closest to was my sister, just younger, 2 years younger than me, Roberta. We did a lot of things together though, and in those days my mother did not drive. So when it was time to have an opportunity to do Christmas shopping, when we'd buy gifts for each other, my job was to take one of my brothers, there was 3 girls and 3 boys, to Salt Lake downtown to go Christmas shopping. And we'd ride the City Lines bus down, do the Christmas shopping that they wanted, and then ride the City Lines bus home. You'd never let little kids do that now. But it was fun, and built some really close relationships with my little brothers. I didn't have any girl friends because there was no girls near my age. The closest ones to my age in that neighborhood were 3 years younger. So I played with the boys. There was a lot of boys, and we played games together we thought we owned that street. We would sit on the road and talk, and cars would have to drive around us. Well, we had a corner market that was very small, and we would go to get a loaf of bread or things like that. To tell you how old I am, one time my mother gave me a quarter, and if I would go up to Lee's Market and buy a big loaf of bread, which would be a 1.5-pound sized loaf of bread, of sandwich bread, if I'd go up and buy that and come straight home, I could spend the change, 4 cents. Well, a whole big candy bar was a nickel, so there was a lot of different things that you could get
with
4 cents. We did our family home evening on Sundays, and one of us would get to go up to the Arctic Circle with Dad, and he would buy 6 ice cream cones and carry them home balanced in a box, and we'd get a large lemon lime soda and take that home and have lime floats for a treat for family home. It wasn't called family home evening, for our scripture study. We read the Book of Mormon, and we read it several times. My dad's a convert, and so he was baptized just about a year before I turned 8. And I can remember going to Dad's church with him, not a lot of times, but sometimes. He joined the church, and he baptized me. I was baptized in the tabernacle on Temple Square. That's where the baptistry was. So
That's
that
awesome.
was a fun day to get to go down, clear down to Temple Square to be baptized. And then was confirmed the next day in church. And I remember how warm all the men's hands felt on top of my head. And so when my dad joined the church, he joined it and jumped right square in the center. He never ever questioned, or he obeyed the law. He did everything he could to be as true and faithful and everything that the church was asking them to do. In fact, when I learned to drive, he would say to me, "How fast are you going, sis?" And if it was 5 miles an hour above the speed limit, he'd say, "Remember, we believe in honoring, obeying, and sustaining." Yeah, he followed the rules right from the beginning. And we went to church every single week. And if we were on vacation, we found a church and went to that church. And because that's what you do, you go to church on Sunday. She was a home economics teacher, but not at that time. She didn't start doing that full time until the year I got married. But no, it was after that. Anyway, she taught grade school as a substitute. And then the year I was a senior in high school, she started teaching full time. And she taught me the right way to set a table. And one time she came out to visit us, and I set a pan of macaroni and cheese on the table, and she was horrified. You don't do that. You always put it in a bowl. She taught me all of those things. I didn't always do them, but I knew because she had taught me. I made one today. One of my favorite desserts that she made was cottage cake, it's called. It's a cake that has peanut butter and sugar mixed together as the topping. I remember doing that, having that all the time. And the only time we ever had like a big piece of meat was Sunday. We would usually have a roast or something, some fried chicken or something. And I remember my dad saying, carving, and then he'd say, "Do you want some old dead pig?" We always sat down at a set table to eat dinner. We enjoyed that, all the family. And we always had good meals and well balanced, nutritionally sound. Way better than I did for my children, but yeah. We went on vacation once a year to St. George, which was a 10-hour drive from Salt Lake to St. George. We would go and spend about a week in the fall at deer hunt time, and visit my grandparents, which I figured was probably what heaven was like, to be at Grandma's and Grandpa's house. I didn't even think to ask Glenn where he wanted to get married, because I just knew I wanted to get married in St. George. That wasn't very kind of me. I thought about it years later. It wasn't very kind of me to just at least ask. When I was little, we went to church in the morning, Sunday morning, and then would go home at noon and go back at 7 o'clock for sacrament meeting. And my dad sang in the tabernacle choir, so he didn't come to the morning meetings with us because he was at the tabernacle. But we always went together to sacrament meeting. And I really loved my junior Sunday school teachers. and enjoyed that. I've always liked church. I, I like to go. And because Bruce R. McConkie lived in our ward, he spoke at our ward at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. And his father-in-law is Joseph Fielding Smith, and so he came a lot. So we had some pretty neat experiences. I just always loved to go to church. I never ever had a desire to not go, to skip out or to. I always loved going, and I can't ever remember gaining a testimony because I just always had one. I went to Libby Edward Elementary School, and I walked 4 blocks to school because my mom didn't drive, and it was downhill, down 33rd South, and as to go home was uphill, and I used to dream how good it would be if you could just sit on the wind and let it carry you home. I played the violin in our little orchestra, and that carrying my books and the violin was kind of a big deal. But that was, so that's why I wanted to sit on the wind and kind of get a lift home. And then for junior high, right at the time that I went into 7th grade, my dad and mom went to Europe with the Tabernacle Choir. And so the family stayed with Grandma in St. George, and so I started 7th grade in St. George at the school there, and went until November, so 3 months about. And I still am close to those kids that we went to school with. But then I also went, after we graduated from high school, I went to Dixie College and was in the same class, with those kids that I'd got close to in 7th grade. And then we went home for the last half of that year and back to Salt Lake, and they had built a new junior high just a block and a half from our house, but it wasn't finished. It was supposed to be, but it wasn't. So we went double session on the bus down to a building that was 3 miles away. And then, so I left the house at 12:30 and got home at 7 at night, because the kids that were supposed to be in that building had the morning session. I did get to go the next year to Evergreen Junior High into this brand new building, so it was very cool. Then I went the very first part of my sophomore year at Olympus High in Salt Lake. Then my dad was transferred to Kanosh, Utah, which I wasn't sure was a good idea. Turned out to be really cool, but it was very lonely, and I felt like I'd been kind of thrown off the edge of the earth for my sophomore year. But then went and graduated from Millard. I went to Brighton Ski Resort, was where we went to. It wasn't a ward event like it is here. It was, you signed up and went up there, and then our ward girls went, but you weren't even together. They assigned you out with a counselor, and I learned how to do a few things, but I just had a great time with a lot of girls from the Salt Lake area for a week, and it was very fun. And then I went, when the summer I was in St. George, I went to Pine Valley for camp, girls camp. And yeah, I can remember that was a lot of fun with those friends that I grew so close to over all those years.